Oh, yes.
Welcome back once again, everyone.
Hi.
Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Transformers War for Cybertron Earthrise Voyager class Megatron. This is number 38 in Earthrise, and this Megatron is a fairly substantial retool of the Siege Megatron toy. I've had some pretty mixed feelings on this. My initial reaction to its reveal was not overwhelmingly positive. To me, just is way too similar to the Siege one for me to feel like there was much effort put into this at all. But I've been waiting to really reserve judgment for actually getting this guy in hand, right? Because sometimes the photos and the renders just don't do it justice, Sometimes you just got to get it and play with it a bit to know if you really like it. So, if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Megatron in his box. We'll open it up. We'll see his map piece. We'll take a look at his instructions, and then we'll see Megatron himself in both his tank and robot modes. Rest assured, I will be doing plenty of comparisons and group shots with the different versions of the Siege Megatron mold. Might do all of them, might not. We'll see. And then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Megatron is done up in your standard Earthrise Voyager packaging. It's got all the same logos, colorations, all that. Name, number. And you can see most of them here on the front. I can't really see his weapons. I'm not sure, it must be tucked behind him somewhere. And here, interestingly, is his artwork. And I say it's interesting because if you take a close look at it, the artwork is actually of Siege Megatron. And again, maybe a little hard to tell because they are so similar. But yeah, it is Siege Megatron. Pretty good giveaway is the back treads here, the way they're designed, the head, all that. So he's in the same boat as Starscream, where Starscream had new artwork for his Earthrise incarnation, but the artwork was still of his Siege toy. And given the background, I think this is all from the same group shot that shows the Decepticons together aboard their ship. And I'm guessing that artwork was done really early into the toy line's life before they had finalized designs. It's kind of like how they used Thrilling 30 Trailbreaker here on the back instead of the new version. They just didn't have it at the time, I suppose. So you look in the back, here's the CGI renders. You got the robot mode, the tank mode. He takes 21 steps to transform, which I don't remember the exact count of Siege Megatron, but I imagine it's pretty close to that. And this guy's billed as being a more Earth-like tank mode, which I guess maybe marginally so. I mean, he's still got feet hanging off the back and stuff, so I don't know. Now, I will say one thing that disappointed some people. The renders show him with clean shins, right? There's no battle damage paint or anything. But the final product has battle damage it's either very similar to or the same as the Siege toys. I'll have to get them together to see how different they are. And, people that really like the cleaner aesthetic of Earthrise compared to Siege were very disappointed by that. And I totally get that, right? Like 80% of this guy is very clean colors, and then you just got the battle damage shins for some reason. Makes him very inconsistent, right? So, I don't know. I'm not sure why that decision was made, because for consistency's sake, I actually would have preferred him without the battle damage. Okay, now here's Megatron's map piece. If we get our handy dandy decoder, we find it's Cybertron. So, I almost kind of stopped wondering when we were going to get this. Honestly, I mean, you think it'd be like a given, right? That Cybertron would be on the map. It is fitting that, it comes with Megatron, because if there's something he covets more than anything else, it's probably the planet Cybertron. So, pretty cool, pretty cool. I was wondering when that was going to happen. Here's Megatron's instruction book, done up in your usual Earthrise greenish blue color. Decent render room on the front. You can see on the render it's actually got him pointing his tank cannon towards you rather than the blade on the back. I don't know if that's an intentional option or just a messed up pose on the render. You got your little tech specs for him, which looks like his speed is really low. I mean, that makes sense given the alt mode, but usually Hasbro just makes the leaders like near perfect 10s, so kind of surprising they made them that low. This shows you vaguely how to attach his sword component along with this little shield piece. It doesn't explain it very well, but I'll show that off for you guys. And then you just have the transformation from robot to tank mode. It's very similar to the transformation used on Siege, because this is a retool. So you get that, and then just a little bit talking about how to use the map piece and the decoder. And now here we have Megatron in his vehicle mode. And I get what they're, where they were coming from now with the whole like Earth-based tank. Getting it in hand, it does look more down to earth than the Siege version. Specifically because there's less of a sci-fi bend to it, especially with the new turret piece. So like, I'm getting it now, I'm understanding it. Still think this and the actual sword shouldn't have just been one solid piece of gray plastic, but whatever. The treads are all different. Both the front treads here and then the part that comprises the shins, all new pieces. Has D16 on the sides, which for you more long-term fans might recognize that number. It is the number given to the original Megatron toy by Takara, because they numbered all the things either A something or D something, depending on the faction. Nice big bold Decepticon symbol on the side. Pretty cool looking. I like it. The turret turns just fine, just like the Siege version. In fact, I think it's the same piece. The arms, as well as the arm panels here, are exactly the same as the Siege one. Hands, everything. The fusion cannon is new. It's made to look a little less greebly, a little more cartoon accurate, which is cool for the robot mode, though I think it actually hurts the tank mode because it just is like a very obvious handgun scope just sticking out of the back of this tank here, but whatever. The new front part looks really good in this mode, like little detailing here. The barrel looks nice. It does look like an Earth-based tank. That's pretty cool. Still has the feet that hang out in the back. And then this is that black little shield piece that you saw going under his sword in robot mode in the render. And this thing exists apparently just to fill out the back section, because a lot of people complain about the whole H-tank design with Transformers, because it's not very realistic looking, and they did want to make this look like an actual tank, so you just get a piece of black plastic, fill it in. So it is parts forming, which is not ideal, but I mean, I guess he was already parts forming a bit as it is, so whatever. And gives him an extra accessory to help, I guess, mitigate the fact that his new accessory is a lot more simple than the old sword. Underside looks pretty much like the other one. His head doesn't go down quite as far as the Siege version. Pokes out a little more. And this is kind of cool. I didn't notice this till I got him open, but there's this added weathering effect on the bottom, but unlike that like gray, like metallic scratching look, it's done up to like some sort of like dirt or sand on the underside of his treads, which is a very nice touch for realism, If he's rolling around, out in a dirty setting, that's what the bottom of his treads will look like. So I think this is battle damage done well, in my opinion. And even, the stuff on his treads doesn't look too bad. I think it's a bit much. Again, they really overdid it and just kind of looks like somebody spray painted this dude silver. I get what they're going for, but, again, for this specific release, I think they would have done better just to leave the battle damage off. Let it stay in Siege as that chosen aesthetic. Earthrise really doesn't do the dirty look so much. There's very little battle damage throughout Earthrise. But, minor nitpick. Really doesn't bother me either way. It's a pretty nice looking tank, except for the feet. They still can't do anything with the feet, which is unfortunate. Okay, and now we have our Siege Megatron over here on the right for comparison. Just so you can see everything that's the same, everything that's different. One thing I should take back, the shoulder panels are not the same. They're a little bit bigger and have some added like gun details on them with some extra tabs and stuff. So my mistake. Here you can see the difference with the fusion cannons. This one's got a lot more detailing on it, but looks less like the original. Arms are the same pieces. Obviously this is all new. Same feet. And I do want to point out that the feet on the new Megatron, they don't lock into a straight position, or, the ankles don't. At least not on my copy. Now, I don't know if this is due to the new shin pieces just not having a way for them to lock in, or just tolerances, because between all my different copies of Siege Megatron, they're very inconsistent, right? Some have both the ankles plug in, some only one actually works. So it might be a QC thing, or it might just be the new design. But yeah, you can see the feet are the same. This is obviously a new piece, different shins, different treads, different front section. So he's more heavily retooled than, you know, he appears at first glance. So that's nice. On the bottom, the chest piece is all new. They're very similar in design, but this one's just done up in a way to more closely resemble the animation model. Different heads, which we'll get a better look at in a minute. These are different, the pelvic pieces. I think the whole thigh assembly is the same. And I think they use the same wheels. That's a pretty minor detail. So overall, there's a lot of new parts. Now, in a way, he kind of falls in the same category as Earthrise Optimus, where it ends up looking very similar in overall design to the Siege version, because it's supposed to be the same guy, just with a new Earth mode. The biggest difference is that there's much less part sharing between the two Optimuses than what we're seeing here. But I will give them credit, there are a lot more new pieces than I initially realized. So it is a heavier retool than I thought. Still, you know, what really bugged me about it was that they could have done so much more. You know, instead of releasing just two very similar looking Voyager Megatrons, you know, within a year of each other. But I'll touch on that a little more later. For fun, here's a look at all of our War for Cybertron Megatrons so far. You got the new one in the middle, regular Siege, cartoon color Siege from the 35th anniversary, Netflix version, and the Combat Hero Megatron from Selects, who's, you know, definitely the most different looking out of all of them. So, you know, you got a lot of options. A lot of options. And I guess, you know, at the end, I'll talk about, in my opinion, which one I think is the best one to go with so far. Okay, now it's time for our transformation. So the first thing you do, just like the other Megatron, is you're going to remove this cannon here. Just slides right out, plugs into the barrel here. And then we're going to go ahead and detach the legs from the upper treads here. Kind of wriggle them out. And once you got those free, you're going to come here and open up these front treads a bit. Pop them off of this middle section, like so. And get some wiggle room, so you can pull all this up. And just kind of leave it like that. Now, you want to get in here and grab the little inner shin panels on the legs. Actually, before we mess with the legs too much, let's go ahead and remove this piece. And for anyone that needs to see it, the way that this plugs in, you want this little downward pointing section to go toward the main body of the tank. And these two little tabs go, so I get some good lighting here. Here we go. They go on either side of this little like partition here, so in these holes. That's where you want that. So just set that aside for now. All right, continue on here. Go ahead and remove those. Legs will transform just like the Siege one, so you just kind of wiggle that section down, straighten it out, close that, lift the feet up, flip the heels out, bring it down, just like Siege. The same thing here. Bring it down. All right, now let's mess with these. So, this is the tough part. You gotta like get these flipped up. Gotta clear this area here with these, so you have to just kind of wriggle around. Once you do that, go ahead and fold these inward, like so, and they'll just kind of fit nice and snugly inside this big panel here. Go ahead and wriggle this arm, which would be his right arm, so it's on our left right now. Wriggle it free of the fusion cannon. Flip his shoulder panels all the way in. Go ahead and flip this down so it's out of the way. Now, before we bring the back down, go ahead, turn him at the waist 180, and bring the back section down. You want it to where, see these tabs here? They're going to plug into these slots in the back. So you got to work them down, plug them in nice and tight. Head should come to rest in a nice neutral position. Flip the fists out. Bend them if you want to. And just pose them up a bit. Again, his ankles don't lock into place, at least not on my copy. So I don't have to worry about that step. You get all this. Now for his extra weapon. I'll take it, flip this handle down, and there's a 5mm hole here, and a peg right here. You're just gonna go ahead, plug this on just like so. And then plug it into the forearm. And it's a long post, so you have to wriggle it all the way in to overcome the friction, but we'll go in there. You may even want to give it some space just to give him clearance to move around more. And here we go. This is our new Earthrise Megatron. And again, overall very similar looking to the Siege version, but with some key sculpted differences. One thing I want to point out, his arms, they lack the little like flip up piece that filled out the shoulder part more and also became kind of the front of the tank turret. Now that part's not necessary anymore because he gets all this to fill that in, so it's just been removed entirely. And so I think this back piece right here, this black part on the back of his arm, I think that's a new molding to accommodate the fact that those little, hinged little panels aren't there anymore. Like I said, new abdominal section, new pelvis, new shins. Arms are mostly the same. New fusion cannon, new treads, new sword weapon. Ooh, and I got it backwards. Look at me. I did the same thing the render did. There we go. There it is. I mean, you could have it either way. You can have the tank cannon pointing forward. I'm sure it was meant to go either way. So that's what he's supposed to look like. Now, one big functional difference between this toy and the old one is that there are no 5mm ports on the top of the treads here, just on the back. And that kind of becomes a problem for the upcoming redeco of this toy. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So for anybody that doesn't know, this toy is getting a recolor as G2 Megatrons, like the first one, the green and purple tank. Now, I mean, I love G2 references, but I'm very let down because there's no retooling at all. It's just this toy with a whole lot of green and purple. So, the body shape really just doesn't match at all. It, in my opinion, is a very lazy G2 redeco. I'm still getting it because I absolutely loved that design. In fact, I never owned one, but when I was 5, my friend did, and to this day, I'm still jealous because that was a cool toy. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, one is to talk about the lack of 5mm ports on the treads here. So the G2 Megatron, instead of having a fusion cannon on his arm, he had the tank cannon over the shoulder, right over here. And on the Siege version, you can mimic that. In fact, I did it for the Combat Hero Megatron because he had the same thing going on, the shoulder cannon. You can't do that, so that's really going to hurt the whole silhouette of the toy. It's not going to look anything like G2 Megatron except in color. And one other small detail, and this is something I've been wanting to talk about this whole review. So the head sculpt. If you don't know, you'll see here in a second, it's quite different from the Siege one. It's a whole new head sculpt. And it's kind of a mystery why they would put this particular design on a supposedly cartoon accurate Megatron toy. Yeah, it really seems like an odd choice because the Siege Megatron head was pretty much perfect as it was. My theory on this is that if you go back and you look at Generation 2 Megatron, not the actual toy, but his comic appearance from the Marvel Comics, this head design is pretty much dead on with how his head looked in the comics, especially the helmet shape and everything. So I kind of have a theory that this toy originally, either it was just originally going to be done in the G2 colors as the mainline release, and maybe they backed down because they thought it wasn't recognizable enough, I don't know. Or they did it just so this toy could double as a G2 Megatron. But then it puts it in this weird position, right? Because now you have, G1 Megatron with the wrong head, or G2 Megatron with the wrong body. So, to me, it's like a lose-lose. I mean, honestly, maybe they should have just kept the Siege Megatron head as an alternate tooling, to use for this release, but I don't know. It's a weird choice because it's a weird head for a supposedly Generation 1 Megatron toy. Okay, and here is the Siege Megatron. If I'm going to talk about him, I might as well show him, right? So this lets you compare the two. And overall, despite all of the battle damage on like the treads and everything, this toy's still a lot cleaner looking than the Siege one, because Siege one had that stuff everywhere. It had it on his arms, his chest, his helmet. Very dirty looking. So he still comes out looking cleaner, especially in the robot mode, because most of the unsightly damage bits are kind of out of the way. But you can see, same arms, except for this part here. Yeah, it looks like just a new piece was thrown in the back, which is probably why it's a different plastic color. That would be my guess. And these are the 5mm ports at the top I was talking about. Still got them on the back. Just got rid of the ones on the top, and I think that's a shame because just leaves this guy unable to mount a cannon on his shoulder, which really kind of kills the whole G2 thing. I still prefer the old sword over the new one. I think it just works better as a sword. And normally I have them holding the sword in their hand, the Siege ones, but I wanted to just have these dudes set up in a way to where they're comparable. One thing I will say is that they seem to have improved the way his wrists lock into place. They actually do have kind of like a little clip in there, whereas with the old one, very loose. And this one kind of locks in, but I've always had an issue with the Siege Megatrons getting their wrists to stay flipped out all the way. Everything else is functionally the same, though. If you've played with Siege, the new Earthrise won't feel too different. Here's that head sculpt difference I was talking about. See, between these two, one of these looks a lot more like the cartoon version than the other. And this one kind of makes his face look puffy. It really doesn't even look like, Megatron so much. It actually reminds me of Megastorm, which... Shocking, right? The toy that was basically G2 Megatron. In fact, I'm willing to bet more than a few people will buy that new Selects Megatron and just repurpose it as Megastorm. Willing to bet. Alright, and one last group shot with the Siege Megatrons in their robot modes. And, Megatron is just so all over the place, honestly. First you had the original Siege Megatron, which came out, and you're like, oh man, that's pretty cool. Closest thing we've had to a G1 remake, aside from maybe Masterpiece. And then they came out with like the Cartoon Colors one. You're like, oh man, there it is, Cartoon Colors. This is my G1 Megatron, because I'm all about the cartoon. I'm not, but people are. But then like, oh, Earth Mode Megatron, but he's not Cartoon Colors. So now it's like one step back, one step forward. And then you got the Netflix colored one. Then you got a random, obscure, canceled G2 toy, and it's just like, what are we even doing? Personally, I'm not a cartoon purist, so I don't need a quintessential cartoon Megatron. I just need a good Megatron that's based on the G1 design. Is like what would make me happy in a chunk collection. But for all the people that are, I imagine this is really playing with their feelings right now, because they're like, why can't I just get what I want? They should have just saved the cartoon deco for the new one, I guess. But yeah, it is what it is. There are 5 different Megatrons in War for Cybertron, and there will be 6 soon. So honestly, just take your pick, I suppose. Now, for my honest opinion, when it comes down to which one I think is just the best Megatron, just overall as a toy, regardless of cartoon accuracy or toy accuracy or what, I think my favorite is still the Netflix one. Netflix Megatron is just so nice looking. He's got so much paint. He looks like he's actually made of metal and not a flat gray plastic. And he's just really solid. Plus he comes with 2 Battle Masters, so there's a plus. This guy, I don't really count him when comparing them because he's just doing his own thing here. And for anyone that doesn't know, he's got a different head sculpt than the other Siege toys for unknown reasons, because the head sculpt's not based on the Combat Hero Megatron. It's actually based on a pre-Decepticon Megatron from the IDW comics, like the first run. Don't know why. I can only theorize that at some point they were planning on making that version of the character and then defaulted to Combat Hero instead for reasons that we'll really never know. We'll just never know. Really would have loved a minor Megatron though. Like swap out his tank turret for a grill, right, and be perfect. And third-party companies have done it, so just saying. If Hasbro's listening, I still wouldn't turn that down, even after getting the Combat Hero version. So yeah, I think that covers comparisons. This guy is the most unique, but if you're only gonna pick one Megatron, I'd still go with the Netflix one. Just a gorgeous toy. And even though, his tank isn't necessarily in Earth mode, it's close enough, right? You can squint and be like, it kind of looks like it's from Earth. But, it's up to you. Everyone's got their own priorities. And one last fun shot to wrap this up. We got Megatron fighting Earthrise Optimus Prime. Because it's fitting, So, if you get this guy, you can have fun, living out your little Earth-based battles between these two enemies. Though, again, I think I would have been content with the Siege one. It's close enough to me. So, now, having looked at it, talked about, had our fun, what do I think of this Megatron? He's fine. It's a really, really good Megatron toy. It improves in some ways over the Siege one. In other ways, I'm not quite as fond of it. Again, I think his sword weapon's kind of silly looking. You can tell they're really reaching for some way to turn that turret into something that resembles a weapon. I think the tank mode's a little bit better overall, just much beefier looking, and they did find a way to cure the whole H-tank syndrome that so many Transformers toys have. Not crazy about the head sculpt, at least not for this version. It'll work better for the G2 one, which we'll get hopefully soon enough. We'll start shipping. So, I like it about as much as I like the Siege version, which is a lot. If I were a more casual collector, I probably wouldn't pick this guy up if I already had that version, just because they are that similar. And unlike Optimus, who comes with a trailer, there's not a huge reason to get, this version over the other one. Now, me being a completionist and, wanting to complete the map piece and also just wanting to get a chance to look at this guy and review it for you, I picked him up. But if you are in a bit of a budget or you really don't need to have every version of every character, I would say get this one or get the Siege one. The pros and cons for both kind of cancel each other out, and he's okay. He's not enough of an improvement to where I'm really happy about essentially getting this toy again, but it doesn't make him bad in any way. He's totally fine. He's a very good Megatron. And, if you want a Megatron that's a little cleaner looking, less battle damage, he works for that too. Now, personally, I really would have preferred, since they already halfway made this guy a G2 Megatron and, we're going to recolor him, I wish they would have just gone all out. Just do the G2 Megatron. Do a faithful update of the original design. It's a simple enough design, you can easily just make a more posable version of that. Generations is essentially G1 with knees at this point. That's what they always say. And, that's fine, right? I'm totally okay with that. I just need them to kind of follow through with this whole G2 thing instead of, forgive my language, but half-assing it. So in my opinion, a leader G2-based Megatron would have been a much better call for Earthrise than just another Voyager Megatron who's marginally different than the other one. Of course, I don't know what's going on there at Hasbro. I can't read their minds, and they're not really gonna tell us too much either way. So I don't know why these decisions are made. They could have just wanted to have a Megatron that's more familiar to people than a Generation 2. They do seem to be less willing to come up with unique designs for characters these days, and they just want to kind of rehash the same designs they've had since, 84 or so. So who knows why they do what they do. But again, solid toy. One last thing that might be worth pointing out, this toy was delayed. It was originally supposed to be in Wave 2 for the Voyagers alongside Snapdragon, but he was pushed back to Wave 3 to ship with the Quintesson Judge, who I unfortunately don't have yet, but hopefully will soon. I have a theory for this. I think they intentionally pushed him back because there's still such a glut of Siege Megatrons in so many places. And of course, I'm speaking for the US. I'm not sure what the situation is elsewhere. But here at the US, especially at Walmart, you have so many Siege Megatrons left. Whether it's a standard version, the Netflix version. Some places even still have the 35th anniversary cartoon version. So I think they did that specifically to like give the old Megatrons time to clear the shelves, because this would, honestly, if they had released it in Wave 2, it would just be another Megatron clogging shelves. So I think it was a good call. As disappointed as I was that we weren't getting him sooner, it's a good call, because you don't want this guy to undersell, right? You want him to sell. So you don't want to just throw him in there with a bunch of almost identical toys. So I will say, smart move on Hasbro's part. I think that was a wise decision. Okay, coming off that aside though, having said, my part on this toy and what I think of it, now it's time to hear what you all think of Megatron. Do you think he's an improvement over the Siege version? Do you think he's a downgrade from it? Somewhere in between? Do you want to pick him up if you already have the Siege version, or did you hold out on Siege and maybe this guy's answering your prayers? Any and all feedback is, of course, always welcome in the comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like, let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. And thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers War for Cybertron Earthrise Voyager class Megatron. And with all that said, I will see you next time.